Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting of the State Board of Elections. I'm Peter Kaczynski. To my right is Douglas Kellner. To my left is Greg Peterson. And to my right is Andy Spano, the four commissioners. I will open the meeting with the minutes from our meeting of August 2nd. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, those are approved. We will now move on to unit updates. Our first unit is the executive, Bob Brem and Todd Valentine.
Well, we had the primary election on Tuesday. From our perspective, it was quiet, because it was all local offices. There was no state offices involved, so operationally, we didn't need to run the election night reporting, so that went smoothly. And the phones were quiet. We're dealing with the usual post-election questions about tie votes and close races today. And then we'll look forward to certifying the primary results. Given the JD roll calls have been sent out to the conveners, so the JD conventions will be coming up in the next 2 weeks. And then obviously, any party reorganizations on the state level, the Republican Party reorganizes next Tuesday, so they have to get their committee list. There were a couple primaries involved there, so those will be certified to them as soon as we hear from the counties on that. One thing that's been in the news, but it's been quiet, is we had contacted the voters registration task force, but we really haven't heard back from them. We've been working on getting our contract in place for voter registration forms, but we really haven't heard much from them. So I don't. And they said they would call. We called. They said they would call us, and we just haven't heard back from them.
So they haven't reached out for any training or anything from the staff?
After our last meeting, we spoke, Todd and I were both on the phone, we spoke briefly with the Governor's Council, Alfonso David. We met the new assistant to the Deputy Secretary, Sharima Abel is our new person, because we had gone down to one of the meetings on the cyber security task force in New York City. It was at the Governor's office, and that's where Sharima was located, so we at least used the opportunity to meet her in person. We reinforced with her the concern of the commissioners, and we did get a call back from our contact in the governor's office, Giancarlo, that they were going to reach out and set up a time with Todd and I to talk about it, but Giancarlo has since left the chamber, so I haven't heard from anybody since then. We do training, as you all know, for NVRA, so we sent the NVR training to them, the document that Greg uses to do training for the agency, for the NVRA people. So we at least sent that to them as here's what we do now, if that serves any purpose for the conversation of what you want us to do. But other than that, we haven't heard back.
I think it's unfortunate. I'm hoping they'll use that as a template for how to train. So.
Well, that's what we're hoping. I mean, there'd have to be some minor modifications to it, obviously, because we're not doing the full NVRA program, but.
The only other, I think, we have spent a great deal of time on our own efforts. The cybersecurity risk assessment that we're doing, it's two parts. The county part is up front. The state effort is next, because we're updating the Nysboe system in the next couple of months also. So we purposefully put the counties first so that the risk assessment isn't to the system we're replacing, but to the new system we're putting in place when they get to us. We expect that will be done somewhere by the end of the year, but we've also had a number of workshops that a number of people on staff have attended with the governor's cybersecurity advisory board. We've met with representatives in 2 meetings in New York City on workshops on what New York's posture should be with regard to ensuring that the election systems in general are protected. We're expecting a report of that panel to the governor. I don't know if, I expect that some portion may be public. our conversations so far, I think, are just reinforce what we're seeing in our own risk assessment, that there's the voter registration system is a component of county computer systems, and they're only as protected as the weakest link in the county computer system, and that's going to take an awful lot of work to protect the voter registration system because of the way they're nestled in there. But there's a number of recommendations that we can all look at. I think it's going to cost money and take more of our time, but I think it's kind of the area that we are in. And I think a good example of that is one of our counties, Schuyler County, called us in mid-August, towards the end of August, just before, it was like the 30th of August. Their entire computer system had gone down, so we had heard from the commissioner, Fazeri, that the system isn't working. I don't know what's wrong, but I think the entire county is down. We talked with the county IT director, who had not yet alerted any of the contacts that we had been sending out to them to reach out for help to the FBI, to the state incident response team. We gave him those contacts. He did reach out that day, and by the end of that day, the FBI, the state police, the state IT department had come in to give them immediate assistance on the phone, and they had a team of people in there the next day. It was a system that affected the entire county, so, you know, jail, 911, every computer system. They had 30 servers that needed to be replaced, 300 workstations, including the Board of Elections. But clearly, you know, the team of people that New York has that have been working on this really stepped up to help them. There seemed to be a reluctance to make those calls. You know, these people are really here to help you. But we did convince. It didn't take a lot of convincing. You know, the IT director probably was in a panic mode of what we do. So it shows we need a more coordinated incident response plan when the county computer system goes down. But the voter registration vendor helped the county to run the Republican primary on Tuesday. We offered whatever assistance we needed, if there was any. I was told that they were back up and running either Wednesday or Thursday of this week.
Excuse me, Bob. You said the vendor helped them run the Republican primary on Tuesday, and I can't let that remark stay on the record uncorrected.
The voter registration, make sure that they had at least lists and reports. They had already, because they're an NTS county, NTS prints their poll books for them. They had already off the updated file just before the computer attack, so that they could get their poll books. But they talked to each other to make sure, was there any interim help they could give them through lookup, et cetera. We offered the same assistance if they needed it, you know, because if they needed us to do through the statewide.
So the vendor helped them get their poll books printed. The vendor did not run the election.
That's correct.
Okay.
So, you know, it's, you know, I think at our level, you know, Todd still is active in his role at the National Association of State Election Directors. We are looking at what all the other states are doing, but there still are really only two, New York, and I'm not sure the other state,
New Jersey and Virginia.
New Jersey, that have actually tried to pull the team together like we did between, you know, federal Homeland Security, the Federal Election Assistance Commission, the association, local government, state Homeland Security, information technology, to put a team of people together to at least assess the risks and come up with a plan to address it. There are a lot of resources out there that can be pulled together as what are the best practices, what is the model to follow. The task that is before us, I believe, is big, and that is how to make a complete inventory of all of the issues, what are the highest priority risks, and then take the resources that we have to try and mitigate that group of risks. And the risks to the system are as significant as the weakest link. And as we saw in Schuyler County, the weakest link is not necessarily an election office link, but it still can interfere dramatically with the ability to deliver services had it been more widespread. So we continue to work on it. I think we will give you more information as that report comes, but I think we as a state board will have to do much more than we're doing now. We are the partner for the county boards, especially the small counties that just don't have IT departments or staff, in order to come up with that list of best practices. I think we will be coming to you with some recommendations to strengthen or provide more guidance by way of regulation, because our regulations are small with regard to the security requirements for the list. They may need a little tweaking with regard to voting machines, but that's where the majority of the effort was in 2009 when we rolled out the new machines. But I think we're learning that we need to do more with the list itself, and that's the more complicated.
What caused the breakdown on that?
It was not an election related. It was the county infrastructure where most likely it was a cyber hygiene. Somebody probably, and there's no conclusion yet. They took their servers and they're analyzing them, but it looks like somebody probably clicked an email and something got downloaded, and it was there undetected and started to look within the computer system for administrative pass rights. Once it broke that administrative passcode, it attacked. And the administrative passcode it found was a vendor maintenance contract that the county had for something, and that doesn't mean there weren't other weak ones in there, but that was the first weak one it found, and once it broke that administrative passcode, it got into the entire county system.
It wasn't from our concern, what we're trying to raise is that it wasn't in the elections board wasn't the problem, but they were impacted by a weakness in the county system. So when we're looking to secure the registration system, that's always hosted a part of the county system. So we're seeing that there's a bigger problem here, because it's like, well, we're not siloed off. We can't just isolate ourselves. Maybe we can. Maybe that's the decision that we're finally reached. But either way, there's resources and money involved in order to either protect all of the county systems, or I don't think people are going to just protect the elections board and leave everything else unprotected. I don't think that's going to be manageable. But there's a big challenge ahead.
I believe Bill Cross had something to offer here.
I was just going to say to your question, I believe they have identified a root cause. They're not sharing specific details for obvious reasons, but they have done a lot of forensics on what happened. So it's not an unknown.
What happens in a statewide election, say for governor, and this county doesn't vote? You don't have all these safeguards and you can recreate the books. What happens? You have no results from one small county in the state of New York. And the numbers work out so that might be significant.
I can sort of come in there. One of the, that scenario is a sort of a doomsday scenario of election administration, and it's our reason to exist, obviously, to make sure that that never happens. But I think that, as this state has shown on other occasions, for example, in the wake of the attacks on 9/11, the election community has been very resilient at rising to whatever challenges they meet. And I think that's the key, that while election administration, as Commissioner Kellner often says, has to be predictable and transparent, it also has to be robustly able to meet unique challenges. I'm sorry. What happens to the authenticity of the result?
In case, if I had predicted before 9/11 that 19 guys with plastic knives were going to go into the World Trade Center and bring it down, you would have said that was a stupid question, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
You would have said that was a stupid question to ask. If I asked you on September 10th.
Oh, no, right, exactly.
Okay, so I'm asking a question. What happens if our human system fails in one small county in a gubernatorial race?
Okay, so in that scenario, the board's obligation is ministerial to count the results that we actually have. So to the extent that we try to make sure we never get to a place where we don't have results, our job is to tally the numbers.
I know we tried.
Right. And so we tally the numbers, and we have the numbers, and declare the result. And then obviously there can be legal proceedings if there's a belief that those results, or the lack thereof, impacts the who actually won, and to the extent that that can be determined, it can be determined in a court proceeding. If the title to the office, based on the ministerial results that the board reports, is in question, then under the executive law, the Attorney General has the authority to bring an action in quo warranto to remove the wrong person being seated. So for example, let's say it was an extremely close election and a certain amount of results are missing, and the wrong person theoretically has been seated. The Attorney General has authority to bring an action in that instance. So the courts have jurisdiction over the canvas, and the Attorney General has jurisdiction to bring an action with respect to the title of the office.
But just to jump in there, to stay with his 9/11 example, one thing you have to remember is the answer is there extraordinary measures would have to occur. So either through the legal proceeding, or more likely, if it was known, there would be a legislative fix, in which, and then 9/11 is an example of that, where the election was canceled. It was a mix. There was an executive order which canceled the election. There was also court actions that occurred which stopped the election statewide, because remember, the impact of 9/11 was really only in one area. After that, once that was stopped, it came to the legislature to come in and start the process over again with a combination between the legislature and the governor to reschedule the election and recognize that the statute, that extraordinary measures will have to occur, probably a mix of legislative, gubernatorial, and judicial, if that occurs. And as Brian says, our point is we recognize that as the doomsday scenario, so that's why we have the redundancy that's built in.
No, I understand that.
You know, so that's why we go through these efforts to avoid going through those extraordinary measures.
There's a disaster provision.
99.99.
Right.
And that's, I think, from our perspective, I think, Commissioner, is I think we've all identified a list of issues that we need to do to make sure that we have redundancy, we have backups. So if something happens, for whatever reason, at least we have a better chance of still conducting that election to the maximum extent that we can follow the majority of the statute, and hopefully all of it, because we have backups, we have some redundancy built in. We're noticing, and we have more now than we've had, because when it was only at the county level voter registration, we didn't have a list. With the statewide database, at least we have most of the information. Not as much as the counties have, but as far as who the qualified list of voters, their names, their election districts, their signatures. So we have some. If we needed to be the one that helped the county, we could at least provide them with something in an emergency, that we could at least have a higher level of confidence we could still conduct that election. But there are a lot of moving parts. And the whole list goes from, voter registration, ballots, machines, poll sites, workers. It's a big list.
I got my answer. Just want to say that in today's process, with everything going digital, the vulnerabilities are greater.
Yes.
And on the other side, there are people trying to, attack the vulnerabilities, and there are more and more.
We need to stay one step ahead of them.
Well, you
Hopefully
try,
2
but
steps.
There's still a lot of problems, especially with money.
Oh, one last thing I forgot to mention, I wanted to mention, is for those of you, I'd like to introduce our new Director of Election Operations. Tom Connolly was onboarded since your last board meeting.
Like
once you get
Looks like the same guy. Wait a minute.
Different seat.
Once you become familiar with him, I'm sure you'll agree that he was a good choice to fill in that position.
I have one more observation. I didn't get an absentee ballot because I didn't expect to be away on primary day, so I drove down. Me a couple hours, but I got there. And I was about 6 o'clock at night, 6:30 at night. And I was the 17th voter. I looked around, there were 6 districts there. And there were more people manning the districts than there were voting in the election at that particular point. I mean, I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the fact that with these digital machines, we can set up a lot better system than we have right now.
One size does not fit all. which is the issue I keep repeating over
Yeah,
and over
right.
again, and I even have it on my notes to raise it again about New
Okay,
York
so
City.
there's your entree.
Yeah. But why don't we do it when we get
Okay.
to
Okay,
operations?
Peter, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Are there any other comments from, any other questions? All right, then we'll move on to the council's office. Kim is not here, so Brian?
Sure. The council's office has been very busy since the last board meeting. Quite a bit of activity in a number of the cases that we're actively managing. I'd also note for the board that we have 2 new cases, and it would be helpful to have an executive session to discuss those.
That we'll plan on that, right?
Okay. And also, with respect to the council's office, we've been particularly busy with phone calls from the counties on election administration matters related to the primary and leading up to the primary. It was a significant call volume because while it's not necessarily a state year, the actual number of candidates and offices that are up in an odd year, and obviously with New York City elections, it's a very significant haul for the county commissioners, and I think we've done a good job at being a backstop for them on any number of issues. We followed up on the regulations that are in the process of doing so that the board approved or put back out for comment at the last meeting in terms of the regulatory filings that are required and the paperwork that needs to be prepared for that. Also, we, in terms of the compliance unit, the total number of filings that have been received for this year, 14,450. Reviews on 10,792 of those have been completed. In the initial review of those filings, 970 were deficient, 2,046 were training issues, and 7,776 were compliant. And since the last meeting, we have sent over the second quarter deficiencies, and there were 25 filings that were on that transmittal. And the unit is continuing on with a number of its initiatives. One thing that I would like to
Excuse me, on the numbers, what about non-filers?
The non-filing update, the July periodic number of non-filers for 2017 stands at 1,879. The present number on the January periodic is 1,454. We also, I'd just like to point that the training unit, actually in-person training, had its highest number of attendees at its conferences since the first year that we switched over to local filers using the electronic system. This year, I think roughly 900 in-person attendees at their training sessions received training. The intake and processing unit and also the reviewers have had a tremendous amount of interaction with new treasurers because of the local election year and helping them get established and be able to follow the rules. And I'm very proud of their efforts at
What training sessions did you have, Brian?
I don't recall the exact number, and I apologize. I meant to actually print that out. I can actually email that, Commissioner. We have a detailed accounting of each session, how many people attended. But off the top of my head, I can't remember. Bill, do you remember the number?
Plus 20.
If you could just send it to me.
Absolutely. Yep. And that pretty much wraps it up. If there are any questions, certainly happy to take them.
Any questions? I guess we'll have some discussion in executive session.
The federal calendar.
Yeah.
You've circulated that. Are we ready now to authorize you to file that with the court?
I believe that we, at a staff level, do not have any outstanding issues with the calendar.
Well,
It was sent to me in my packet. I do
yeah.
have it.
Can we,
Do you want to discuss it?
well, or just authorize them to send it out unless some change needs to be made? I mean, maybe they, are you waiting for comments from the political community?
I don't think so. Bob, you could
I think
speak to
the
that
next
better, but
step is to send it out.
Have you put it up at all?
And publish it as a draft.
Yeah.
That is not.
Publish it as a draft and send it out to the Department of Justice at the same time. So we wouldn't be submitting it to the court yet for many weeks, but that would give the political community time to get in touch with us
Yes.
before it would become final.
The unit, in the last few days, had translated the staff working version of the calendar into the language of the proposed order to prepare it for that process. So that process has been advancing.
I think our goal was October 1st. Is that still on as far as getting it to the court?
That was,
Yeah.
well, we're at least getting it to DOJ.
I think we filed the court beginning of October.
Okay.
We should
And
actually.
I think we should get it
do
in
it.
place
So
sooner
let's
rather
send
than
it out.
later
Yeah.
because people need to know what the calendar is. So I think we
Good.
should get it
Thank
to
you.
the court, but if we give like a 2 weeks for comment and then plan to get it to the court by the 1st of October,
I think that's very doable.
that's acceptable. Okay. Was there anything else then for council's office?
No, sir.
Then we'll move on to election operations. I believe that's that Tom Connolly that we referred to earlier, and Brendan.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's been a transition for me into my new role, and I appreciate everyone for their assistance, and Brendan's been great to work with. Obviously, we've been working on the primary election. We received a lot of information from local boards with regard to the JD delegate and the alternate delegate, and also some state committee positions. A total of just over 4,000 local candidate records were entered by our staff into our CAPAS system in order to produce some of the roll calls. As Todd mentioned, we've been working on the roll calls, and we've received a list of JD conveners from the parties, and those roll calls have been prepared and being sent out as we have them ready. Obviously, we've been assisting county boards in any of their requests for assistance in the lead up to their primaries. Most of the counties did have primaries, only 4 did not. Brendan and Charles Smith from our unit did go down to New York City on primary day, and I know that he did see Commissioner Kellner, and there'll be some, I guess, some conversation about that. I will echo the fact that the primary was by and large pretty quiet in our end. We were out of here before midnight, which is early, and we only received a few phone calls from counties throughout the day. We've been working with the PIO unit, just kind of carrying some stuff over with regard to translations of the ballot propositions to get those ready for both publishing, but also to provide to the county boards, and also to then have audio recordings done for the ballot marking devices in the different languages. We have also been working on getting information out and answering any questions on any of the bills that have recently been signed that will impact the county boards. Some of it's a couple of forms, some of it's going to be getting some information. One of the things that I think will be helpful to county boards going forward is the ability to have split shifts for their poll workers. So we'll continue to answer any questions on that and get information out to the county boards. With regard to the automated audit regulations, obviously we've been working with council's office and other staff to review feedback that we've been getting. We did receive a number of comments the other day, or actually one set of comments that we've been reviewing, and we'll be looking to figure out how to implement them into the final regs, and then be looking to bring that back before the board at probably the next meeting. We've been working with IT. We've been continuing working with the IT department with regard to the candidate management system, or CAPAS as I referred to it before. We have scheduled a county meeting to occur later this month on September 26th, in which we'll be bringing in some staff from county boards, some commissioners, to kind of talk about data and the data flow between both from the county boards to the state board, but also from the state board back down, and how we can kind of better improve that transmission of information. We continue to participate in also any of the meetings on cybersecurity projects and the risk assessments. We had our staff follow up with some of the county boards on some of the answers they gave us in their risk assessment survey. Anything that may have seemed somewhat either contradictory to other answers, or just things that they didn't necessarily give us information on, that we want to get some clarification on to kind of give us a better idea of what's going on their end. Beyond that, I think it's a lot of the standard stuff. We've been working with some shoebox reimbursements, some just an asset Any questions about the machines? I did attend 2 meetings in DC at the end of last month. One of them was sponsored by the National Association of Secretaries of State, and that was one of their tech talks that was about cybersecurity, which I thought was very helpful to get together with other states to see what they're working on. Some of them are doing similar things like risk assessments. Some of them have been using different systems or artificial intelligence to look at some of the logs to see what's been kind of protect against unauthorized activity. And then the other one was that I attended was actually about modeling of election processes across the country. So that was a little bit more wonky, but still enjoyable. I was also invited to present at a symposium at Auburn University next month. It's an election center event, and that topic is the collection and aggregation of data between local boards and the state and federal jurisdictions. And lastly, with the staffing issue, we have been holding interviews for a vacant position as administrative aide. We did do a number of interviews, and we did find some candidates, and we offered the position to one of the candidates who accepted, and she will be starting this coming Thursday. So we look forward to getting her on board, as that position's been vacant for some time. And I know there's been some discussion about mentioning it, but I figured I'll just go ahead and say it anyway, since she didn't tell me outright no. Unfortunately, the election operations unit is going to be suffering a second loss. So shortly after losing Anna, and I think Lisa Shaw, who's been with the state board for 38 years, and who is, we're going to be losing a lot of institutional knowledge there, and she's been amazing to work with in the short time that I've been the Director of Election Operations. And so we're hopeful that we're going to do whatever we can to cram as much of her knowledge into our new staff's head when she gets here. So we're going to try to make that transition as best as we can. Brendan, I don't know if you have anything else to add, or if you want to talk about New York City.
No, I just want to say thank you to Lisa for all her years of service. She really is one of the backbones of the unit that keeps everything running on time. And but I know that Commissioner Kellner probably wanted to dive into New York City, so I'll defer to you.
Well, actually, that's my second issue to raise with you folks. My priority concern with ballot design is ballot design, and commissioners will recall that about 2 years ago, we agreed as a consensus matter that there should be experts on ballot design within our operations unit, and that we should be working on that. And I want to, I raised it briefly at the last meeting, where it may have even been earlier, after the fiasco with one of the Albany County School Board ballots. That I'm still very concerned that we are not giving enough emphasis and priority on the importance of ballot design. So, for example, in New York City, just because that's where I spent time, and so I saw a lot of different ballots. They had a primary ballot laid out with candidates for judicial delegate laid out in the two lists of the competing candidates, and then immediately below that was the male district leader, two candidates, while on the left side was the box for mayor, and the boxes did not have lines to highlight the differences, so that one would not even notice that there was this district leader contest at the bottom of the judicial delegate list. To me, that's a fundamental breach of the design guidelines that we circulate and that the professionals recommend. And I believe that our guidelines are modest to begin with. And that better design is critically important. And I would just renew the request that we have personnel within the operations unit who are trained on ballot design. I don't like the feeling, I'm uncomfortable with the feeling that I think I'm the biggest expert around on ballot design, because I don't regard my own skills as substantial enough that should be the person in the state who has this professional skill behind them. So I would ask for a report at the next meeting on what we're doing with ballot design. And I think it's particularly appropriate before this coming general election, that I would hope that you would collect ballots from counties of different examples, again, to critique them in a constructive way as to what can be done to make the ballot more user-friendly. And then another related issue to that is that this year we will have the 3 questions on the ballot. And again, I think it's very important that the ballot be designed in a way that the voters be alerted to the need to vote on both sides of the ballot. And I don't regard one side as the front and the other side as the back. Each side should have a graphic arrow, as the experts propose, that directs the voters' attention, that after they've voted the contests or questions on one side of the ballot, that arrow direct their attention to the need to turn it over and vote on the other side of the paper. And all of the design reports that I've seen recommend that be done both in text and with a graphic, with an arrow. And you know, I think it's our job to have a professional with ballot design capability on our staff, and providing that expertise to the counties. And again, I would hope that we would circulate to the counties and to the vendors who print ballots for the counties the design specifications, and remind them once again of the importance of good ballot design, good ballot layout. And one of the little secrets that may have left with Anna is that from time to time the vendor would call Anna to point out some of the egregiously bad ballot designs coming from the counties. And hopefully Brendan and Tom can...
They can certainly call one of us, too.
Well, it's not can, it's that you need to gain their confidence that it can be handled diplomatically, so that there are not going to be negative reverberations for the vendor for, in quotes, ratting out a county. That it all be done in a constructive dialogue so that we get the best ballots. But I would hope that you not just say they can call me, is that you affirmatively reach out to the counties and to the vendors so that we get good ballot design as a matter of course.
Well, I know that we have been doing that based on some of the primaries, especially with the OTVs and write-ins, just from this past election, as to moves to go forward, including the ballot usability tips that we have, and updating them, especially a lot of the new commissioners in some of the counties that this may have been their first election as well. So making sure that they are aware of exactly what you're speaking to.
Well, let me ask, since I think good ballot design is everyone's goal, is this a topic that's ever been discussed at a conference? And when did that happen?
We were in Rockland County. It kind of came up after the first year. I think it was the winter of 2010. We had just done the pilot program with the volunteer counties in 2009, and then 2010. It was either the winter of 2010, winter 2011. It was right after, I think, the pilot, and we kind of
so it was a while ago.
shared. So, I mean, that was when there was a major discussion about usability and other groups that were reaching out. I'd have to go back and look if there were other Summer, we can't go to the even year summer conference, so it could have happened and we weren't there because
Well,
we were
if we
here.
aren't there, that's a problem.
Well, it's
Because
part of the even-
I mean, I agree with Commissioner Kellner. I think this should be a goal for us to try to help the counties, particularly the smaller ones that I'm sure don't have an expertise in this area, maybe even the bigger ones don't, to assist them in this. And I think the conference is a, obvious place to do it. You have everybody together. It seems to me it would warrant a significant amount of time, because I can't imagine you can do something like this in half an hour. I think it would take a lot of time, and I think you'd have to bring in examples of different ballots that people agree are bad and different ballots people agree are good, and describe why. And you might even seek an outside expert who could come in and discuss the theories that people use as to what's good, what's bad, why it's good, why it's bad. So the boards can be educated in this area, because I suspect they're not. It's not an area that necessarily an elections commissioner has as a qualification when they're appointed to the office. So I would think pursuing it in the next conference, which is in January, might be a route we could go, targeting next year's election. But I mean, it's an ongoing issue. Listen, this is not new. This has been an issue ever since we bought the new machines. And ballot design became a much bigger issue, because with the old lever machines, ballot design was pretty much preordained by the machine itself. Now you have a lot more leeway into how you design your ballot because of the new machines. So it's been a big issue since 10, when the machines came into use. But I'm sure it's still new to people, and they need to have assistance, and we should be providing that. I totally agree. Maybe there are counties that have people who could be helpful in this area. I honestly don't know. There may be some counties that have employed people who have some expertise and background in this, who could be helpful to the other counties. But I would encourage you to, talk to the counties, see if that can't be an agenda item, and then see how we can maybe use that forum to discuss this and get it out there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I just want to confirm that we all agree that the counties and the vendors should be reminded that there should be ballot design instructions to turn over the ballot.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I know we have a court
Ballot.
case pending right now on that issue. I know Evan Davis brought a case on the Constitutional Convention question. I know he's concerned about people not seeing it. I think we should be doing whatever we can to make sure the voters do see the full ballot, absolutely. And if the particular county puts it on the back, there needs to be an effort to make sure the voters are informed that there's a... I mean, you said there's not in the front and the back, but I think most people have deemed that portion with the candidates as the front.
sides.
I mean, it's just the way it is.
Two faces of the ballot.
Well, and
Fair
I'm
enough.
just suggesting that the counties be reminded
Fair
that
enough.
if they use a two-sided ballot, that each side of the ballot should have an arrow saying,
Look
Well,
to
I-
the
the other
other
side.
I
side.
think for our point, we'll take that as a sample of, I think it helps us to tell, what one looks like, so that if there's uniformity in that instruction, I think we can give them, and because we have two voting systems, actually show.
I circulated yesterday just one example.
I know this is an example from the American Institute of Graphic Artists.
Why don't you just show it to,
Please pass it back. Which again just shows in a way that they think that it is good usability. I did confirm with Bob Warren that both machines can integrate a graphic into the instructions. There may be some discrepancies between the two systems as far as placement of the
all I'm
information.
talking about is a graphic. In this, because of the way the ballot was put together, there was limited space. We may be able to make it bigger, but the point is that there'd be a graphic that says, sure, go on the other side.
Well, we've seen examples in the ballots we already have where some counties do that already. If it's in order to, help counties, it might not be as, between the ES&S counties and the Dominion, I think it's helpful for our staff to perhaps give them a actual how to do it in their system, so that they at least understand if that's what we're doing.
The And then the statute requires them when they're supposed to indicate where ballot proposals are, if they're not on the, wherever they are on the ballot, it's supposed to indicate that. So the statute supports that. But as Bob points out, it's like, it's not just giving them the sample, it's also, because this may not be something that they may usually just use the text indication, how that would be. So,
I think we should
No,
give them, if you're in ES&S county, here's how you do it, and here's where we
right,
recommend you
you have
put
to
it.
treat the world.
And I think one of the examples I sent you yesterday had a much bigger arrow with a bend in it, even, you know, but you know, you look at the graphics, and part of it depends on how much space there is, but I guess, well, as I say, I just wanted to confirm for the record that we are recommending this to the counties, and perhaps the people who are litigating with us will recognize that we're doing that, that we would do that as a matter of course.
I can offer one thing very quickly on this, is that one of the things that, you know, we certainly we indicated to the court is the absolute necessity that given the number of questions that they have to appear in the back of the ballot with respect to the Dominion
On the
system.
other side of the ballot.
Excuse me, and we've been very consistent in saying that. I'm glad you corrected me, because that is indeed it. That there be a face of the ballot where the candidates appear, and a face of the ballot where the ballot proposals appear. And what we indicated to the court is that the Dominion system, in terms of its design, absolutely requires that. So there's no option with the Dominion system, even if it were feasible to find a space for it, to put a ballot question on the front. Excuse me, on the candidate side of the ballot. It will not allow candidates and ballot proposals to be on the same side of the ballot. And then with respect to the ES&S system, the practicalities of the grid in which the candidates fit does not leave space for a reasonable ballot design that would accommodate putting a question on the front. And it would certainly it also cause there to be a differential between counties if it were to happen, that some counties have it in one place and other counties have it in another. And that since we put statewide questions on the ballot, since we went to the new optical scan system, they have been on the reverse. Excuse me, on their other side,
that's
the
fine.
proposal side.
All right, so
That's
now
interesting. I didn't know that. I mean, that's it. I actually, just to follow up a minute. So if a school uses a Dominion machine and they have a school board vote and a budget vote at the same time, they can't put them both on the same side?
That's my understanding, yes. Whereas the ES&S system can.
Even though there'd be room, you still wouldn't be able to do it, huh?
Sometimes they go to a smaller sheet ballot, depending on a school election, instead of using the 19-inch ballot. There are other sizes that they could use. Our counties mostly use a 22-inch piece of paper, which ends up with a 19-inch ballot, especially in local election where you have all of those local contests that they get down to. But in a school election where there's usually only a couple of things, sometimes, certainly the ES&S machine is much more flexible where you design things. But Dominion is mostly template driven, and the templates don't allow that.
All right. The other issue I wanted to raise is New York City lines in the presidential general election. I should start by saying New York City did many, many things to improve procedures for the last general election. The presidential general election is much more difficult to run because twice as many people vote in the presidential general election as vote in the gubernatorial general election or the mayoral general election, and it's almost 10 times as many people as would vote in a typical primary election, such as we had this week. So one size does not fit all. And the problem is getting New York City to focus on November 2020 to come into compliance with the 30-minute rule. And right now, I don't see anything on their agenda that would change the status quo from the last presidential general election to indicate that they're going to be able to come into compliance in 2020. So I would propose that we draft a letter to send them, asking them to provide us with a formal plan on what they're going to do differently to come into compliance. It's not an easy issue for them. The biggest problem that they face is that because of litigation over poll site accessibility, the number of poll sites has been dramatically reduced. I think that that litigation has been counterproductive, even for people in the disability community, because, for example, the court-appointed moderator found that that a senior citizen residence was not compliant with the accessibility regulations, and that they could no longer vote in the senior citizen residence where the overwhelming majority of disabled population resided in that election district, and making it significantly more difficult for people with disabilities to vote, because they would now have the added difficulty of having to travel some distance to a fully compliant, accessible site. And I think that that kind of approach is horrible. But that is the law, and New York City is required to comply with it. But it is not acceptable to me that they point that as an excuse for not scaling up the space requirements needed to run the presidential general election in a manner that complies with our regulations. So while they can hold a primary election, and I know Brendan went to several sites that were just beautiful poll sites in newly rehabilitated schools, and they'll put them in a gymnasium or a cafeteria that has plenty of space for a primary election. It's not enough space to run a general election in a way that the voters are not going to back up with long lines. And so we're going to have to get involved to get New York City the resources necessary to comply with that regulation.
Is it a resource problem?
Well, in the sense of they have to go out and take their existing poll sites and say, what do we need to change for this poll site for a presidential general election? So while using the gymnasium may be sufficient for the other elections in the 4-year cycle, the gymnasium alone is not enough for the presidential, because it's not big enough to scale up the number of tables and inspectors that they need to handle the crowd that votes in a presidential general election. But the school is closed on a presidential election day, and so there's no reason they can't expand into other facilities within the school. And they just have to evaluate that on a site-by-site basis on how they're going to handle the presidential election, and not think in the box that the presidential election is the same as a mayoral primary.
But we did send a letter, the board did send a letter prior to the last presidential election. They did respond with a compliance plan.
And a lot of those things were very good and have permanently reduced waiting time for all elections.
So, but nobody's ever perfect, and you never get it right. It's an ongoing thing. So is this really more a question of not so much another plan because they have a plan in place and it is in
No,
operation.
their plan was not sufficient to handle the presidential general election. Their plan has worked great for the other elections, and I believe that there's not going to be any significant problem with the general election this November or next November. But the fundamental problem, in my view, and I believe their own experts have identified this to them, is that they do not have enough space to scale up. Last year, they only went to 2 poll books per election district. So regardless of how many people were anticipated to vote at that election district, there were only 2 poll books, and the poll books were divided alphabetically. I might add not in half, which is to me a mistake, but maybe the experts think differently. That they took the letters in the alphabet and divided them in half, forgetting that many more people fall in the first half of the alphabet than in the second half of the alphabet. So in some poll sites, the lines were much shorter in the M through Z line than they were in the A through L.
V, that's not usually a problem for me.
All right. I'm getting into the nitty-gritty.
No, that's what I'm trying to understand, the sense
But the
you were
biggest
looking for.
issue is that they need more than 2 poll books for a presidential general election. But to get to a 3rd or 4th poll book, and in my view, they need as many as 5, according to the reports that I've seen, they don't have the space to add, to go from the table space to go from 2 books to 5 books. It's just not, there's just not physically
And they
the
need more
space.
poll workers as well to manage
Of course
those poll
they do.
books? So they'd have to get more.
There's
poll
2. I
workers,
remember
too.
when we talked with them before in some of those buildings, I mean, literally they'll have, I've been in poll sites in Manhattan and the Bronx this size with 6 election districts in it. By the time you put 6 tables, A through L, M to Z, if that's their example, the privacy booths, the voting machines, and then a path of travel in there, and now 6 election districts is probably about easily, could be as many as 7,000 eligible voters. Some sites in that size are 12,000 eligible voters. There's too many EDs and eligible voters in that room because that's the room they have. But that could work for them with turnout in certain times of year. But in a presidential, by the time you get 8 o'clock in the morning, the line is already down the street, and there is no way you can overcome that delay for the rest of the day, because it's just no way that you have enough resources in that room. But in order to put 2 more tables times 6 EDs, they just literally need more. Either the building needs to give them another room to use, and some EDs will be here and some will be there, or they need to go find another building. So part of it is the space within the building. They need to, not only have the gym, but maybe the cafeteria or something else.
So I'm suggesting that they give us a new plan for 2020 to tell us what they're going to do differently from 2016 in order to come into compliance.
Are they able to identify from the 2016 election which poll sites had those long wait lines? Is there any documentation from that last presidential showing that these are the poll sites where we had problems with long lines? Does that exist?
Well, ever since 2009, when we started this system, we've asked counties to keep track of how many people per hour have turned out, and that generally would fit into the queuing theory of how many people you can accommodate.
But it doesn't show the backlog.
But they had not been keeping that data in a manual way. They were looking for some other electronic way to record that data. Many other counties kind of did that, so you can kind of figure out, in some suburban areas of New York City, or the more, I guess, suburban, Manhattan, Staten Island, there's a little difference as to the voter patterns. If your community has most of the people showing up within the morning, then you have to staff for the peak hours of the day, not for can I accommodate them by the end of the day? 'Cause
Bob, these
what's-
are just sort of commonsensical things you're saying to me. So it's hard for me to believe that the New York City Board isn't aware of what you're saying to me, that you staff up for the peak hours, that different areas have different peak hours. I mean, that's true upstate as well as down. It's just generally true, but it's just hard for me to believe the city board isn't aware of that sort of.
They certainly are aware.
And so I'm just trying to understand if there's if we can get a handle on these are the poll sites where the problem exists, so we can zero in on those poll sites and say, okay, there's 10 polls or whatever the number is, and here they are, here's where you've had problems, you need to deal with these specific poll sites because that's where your problems are, rather than this sort of generic, you have a problem, figure out a solution, because I've heard this, this has been going on forever. This has been a problem in New York City for a long, long time. And yet I've never seen a list of poll sites where this is where the problem, these are the poll, here's the list of poll sites where this problem
Even
exists.
requiring them to put that list together in 2020 will be a start for getting them into compliance by 2024.
Yeah, I think that's a start for anything.
We do have Charles Stewart's data, which I think is the best data that's out there so far. He does a national survey on waiting time, and one of the staff people got the New York City portion of that data from him, which certainly documents that there's a problem in New York City, but it does not identify it by particular poll site.
Okay.
And you are correct that it's not every poll site that has this problem. It's roughly a quarter of the poll sites.
Is it that high? You think it's
Oh,
25% of the poll sites have waiting lines? over 30 minutes?
My own view, based on Stewart's data and on my own surveys, is that roughly 40% of the people who voted in New York City had to wait more than half an hour in November of 2016. So that's roughly 40%. Some people think it might be as low as 20%, but even 20% is way too much because outside of New York City, the number is close to zero. So what is it that Nassau and Westchester do differently from New York City that they don't have any lines, and you go 3 blocks across the border and it takes a voter an hour to vote? And the answer is because they staff up for the presidential election, and New York City with the presidential election feels that they're limited because of the space constraints.
Well, I will say my experience in New York City is they do tend to cram quite a few EDs into a particular poll site. As an upstate voter, I don't see that in the upstate regions where you have 10, 12 EDs in one poll site. So I think, in my experience, New York is kind of unique. Maybe Westchester has some of that.
5 and 6.
Yeah, maybe that. So I don't know that there's another area of the state where you see those large numbers. To me, that's always been an issue because when you jam that many, as Bob was alluding to, 7,000 to 10,000 people into one room, even if it's a big room, it creates logistical issues. So why they don't break them out more, I guess part of it is lack of available sites, which is kind of ironic to me in the sense that here's New York City with building after building after building, as opposed to upstate where you have large swaths of land where people drive 10 miles to go to their poll site. That New York City has this problem. You would think with all the buildings and available space down there, they would be able to find more space for their poll sites, but apparently they haven't been able to.
So I want to provide the nudge from us to get them to focus on this. So why don't we see if we can come up with a draft? And
you had mentioned Mr. Stewart, who's the MIT professor who has worked with a number of panels, et cetera, but he also has offered several tools that people can use in order to try and figure out what a proper staffing should be based on the anticipated number of voters, so you could use some of that. And I
And the
think-
city does. In fact, Professor Stewart's associate was the expert witness for the city at the recent trial in the Silberberg case. So I know the city is aware of this, and I think Mike Ryan, the executive director there, is doing a great job, but he needs our help to nudge them to address this issue. Because he needs the resources, and he needs to be able to go and say, you know, the state board is requiring us to do this.
Okay. Are there any more questions for the elections operations? You know, you have anything else to add, or you all?
We're done,
You're all done. Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to NVRA PIO John Conklin. I would just note I had a brief conversation with John earlier that I was concerned because I believe at the primary election this past Tuesday, there was some misinformation that was being out there, or that was out there in the media in particular, about people's eligibility to vote in certain primaries in this state. And I just, you know, maybe you should address that, or could address that I think there was some talk about closed primaries that isn't quite accurate as to what the state of the law is in New York, and I didn't know if we were taking efforts to try to make sure that the correct information got out there.
That was number 2 on my report. We did have some misinformation that was sent out. It appeared to be from the Attorney General's press release during the day, discussing that only people who were registered in a party could vote during the primary. And some people, in an effort to correct that, said, no, that's wrong. Everybody can vote in the Reform Party's primary, and that sort of compounded the initial error, when the truth is that only voters who are not registered in a party, unaffiliated, colloquially we call them blanks, they are eligible to vote in the Reform Party primary. So,
And Reform Party members.
yes, and Reform Party members, yeah. So we did correct that in multiple media outlets.
And the Independence Party has a different rule as well.
The Independence Party has a rule that allows, again, the same unaffiliated voters. They're eligible to vote in Independence Party primaries for statewide offices. And if a county has adopted a local rule that allows them to vote in their primaries locally. So I'm not specifically aware of any county that in the Independence Party that has adopted that rule, but we continue to monitor that to make sure.
That would still be a party rule, correct?
Yes, both of them are
When
party rules.
When you say county, it's the county committee or county party.
Correct. So it's not driven by statute, it's driven by the party rules that they adopt that defines who's eligible to vote in their
These are pursuant to court
primaries.
cases that have been brought by these parties to really overcome the state law, which does say only members of a party can vote in the primary. They've had court decisions that have allowed them, by party rule, to have their own rules regarding eligibility to vote in their primaries.
That's my understanding. The lawyers here can correct me if that's wrong, but that's my understanding.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I mean, my point is somebody has to look beyond the statute.
Yes.
In order to realize that this is the rule, and it just, unfortunately, it got out there, and I thought we should make an effort to make sure that's correct.
Absolutely. So, generally, since the August meeting, public information has been busy. We've been receiving a lot of calls. There was campaign finance filings, certainly questions about the primary, lots of questions about the statewide ballot props, particularly the Constitutional Convention, among other things. The primary election day itself was fairly quiet. We had a lot of the usual questions about where do I vote, am I registered, et cetera, those kind of things. But we had very few complaints. Overall, it was a fairly quiet day. So the unit participated in the monthly ECA call in August. We've also been part of the meetings, as Tom mentioned, the cybersecurity stuff with regard to our internal review and also the governor's task force. The unit responded to 87 FOILs in August. We also have noted that the governor just signed a new law to require the state board to publish campaign websites for the office of governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, controller, state senate, and state assembly. So that goes into effect December 1st, and we have 6 months to draft regulations. So our unit, council's unit, and election operations will work together to set that up. So.
And I'm sorry, I don't understand that. What's that new law?
That was our program bill. The 3 bills the governor signed, one on the 12th, 2 on the 13th, were our legislative packet. That was one of them, recommended by Commissioner Spano, that we at least, if, a source where campaign websites, we would put the listing there. So the statute says that a candidate can notify us in writing either on the cover page of their petition or in some other writing, and for those offices, and we will post that information on our website to say that they gave it to us or they didn't. So
We have to put on our website the links
to their
That's a hot button.
Campaign websites?
Candidates'
Right.
campaign
It's a hot
Or
button.
statewide?
well, that's our security group.
Statewide plus the Senate and the Assembly.
Legislature.
Oh, okay.
So we will.
That was
would be their-
Commissioner,
Well, I made a number of those, and
Spano's idea?
something I wrote, and somehow they got picked up.
It was in there somewhere. The other
had
one that I
nothing to
think
do
is
with
even
this.
more valuable is
Speculating.
our proposal to remove the requirement to publish a candidate residence address in the notices that appear within 6 days of an election. You still have to publish the office and the candidate and the party, but the residence address is kind of, what are you going to do with it within 6 days of an election? Seems to be more an appropriate thing that you need to know when they're filing it, perhaps if you wanted to challenge it.
Judges in particular pushed very hard.
sure.
Well, it's an expense issue too, as to, counties having to put that, everybody's concerned about privacy, security, what's the need. The governor signed, it took a number of years to get that done. Governor signed that bill, and the third one was the split shifts. The statute had said half-day shifts, and now it says split shifts, so if you're a community that you really have a need, either at opening or close, or at a particular time of day, you can now, appoint people for parts of days as
And the
opposed
county
to
association has been supporting that
half-days.
as well.
Just to explain that to you. What I have written in something, that there are people with less money, there are people who are looking for answers, and if they're going on, they'll go onto our site, see who's running. And maybe the candidate doesn't have a lot of money, but maybe he has a website, or she has a website. This is just another way for people to get information.
Fair enough. We're back on the first bill now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, fair enough. That's fine. I just didn't, for some reason, that didn't
Well, he
register
gives
with me
me
that we
credit
were.
for it. I don't know if it came from there.
Well, apparently it did.
That's why we advanced
Good for
it.
you. You'll get a.
I don't want any
Did you get
credit
the
because
pen?
I
You get a
don't
little
want
pen
any
Did he get the
certificate?
pen?
Yeah. You should be hanging that on your wall. Okay. Sorry.
So the other item is we're working on the legal notices for the 3 ballot props. They have to be published the week before the election around the state, one in every county, in at least one newspaper in every county in the state. So we're working with a vendor on that. We have
John, can you just quickly go over what those, the one's the Constitutional Convention?
One is the Constitutional
What are the other
Convention,
two?
which pension reform or pension forfeiture reform, as you want
Okay.
to characterize it.
Okay.
And the last one is the creation of an Adirondack land bank.
The swap, isn't it?
Forest
The
Preserve.
swap of some sort.
Includes the
It
Catskills.
sets aside land for utility development and core utility rights-of-way along highways in the Adirondack
It's at
Park.
Adirondack Park.
Yeah.
Forest Preserve, Catskills. And
It
So
does
those are the
not.
3 statewides, and then there may be some local ones
Yeah.
as add-ons that,
Correct.
okay.
So we have a quote on the English language papers. We're still working on the quote for the minority language papers, which would be primarily in New York City, Westchester, and Long Island. So that's moving ahead. With regard to the website, we posted the certification for the primary ballot since the last meeting. We posted the certified language for the 3 statewide ballot props. We posted the webcast and the transcript for the August 2nd board meeting. We did not do election night results for the primary. There were no state level offices on the primary ballot. They were all local offices, so we did not have anything posted for election night results on Tuesday. Lastly, for NVRA, we are doing a training session today in Otsego County with the County Social Services Department. So Tom still has a couple of things that he might be working on, so I'll just ask him if he has anything to add.
At this point, no. I think I covered some of the things in election ops. The only other thing that I know John mentioned to me before was the MOVE Act. It's not a federal year, so it's going to be the deadline for transmittal of ballots for the general election will be October 6th. So obviously we'll be working with the counties to make sure, after the certification of the primary results, to make sure that they get all their ballots uploaded for the military voters.
And lastly, I would just add that since they brought Lisa Shaw up, Lisa Shaw is not just an asset for that unit, she's an asset for the entire agency. Because dealing with FOIL requests that go through election ops is an absolute dream. She can put her hands on any document in a matter of minutes, so she is a treasure to work with.
Well, I would like to just weigh in. I had the pleasure of working with Lisa as well for years, and she's a terrific employee, and I'm sure we'll miss her very, very much. I, of course, wish her well, but I agree with you on what you both said about her value to this agency, or all three of you, I think, said, and she will definitely be missed. I agree. But, you know, that day comes when people retire. This happens. It's a good thing, and we should wish Lisa well in her retirement. And so, are you all done? Okay, then, William Cross, ITU.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As been mentioned a few times already, and Bob spoke to at length, we've been involved in cybersecurity issues, both with Nysboe for the risk assessment for the county boards. We've also begun to work to assemble some information for our own assessment, although, as Bob indicated, the full risk assessment will be against our new infrastructure, but some of the same questions that we ask the counties would be applicable for now in terms of policies, procedures, things like that. So we've started to work on some of that. We've also worked with participated in the meetings that were mentioned with the Governor's Cybersecurity Advisory Board, and reviewed some of the documents leading up to the report and provided our input where applicable. As a side, as Bob indicated, many of the expected recommendations on that will have resource requirements to implement. However, a lot of the discussions that have come out of the working meetings have been useful in terms of suggestions of things that we could do today, just either procedurally or changes to systems that aren't that don't require a lot of resources. So we're looking into a few of those things aside from what the main recommendations are expected to be. So that has been useful. That process has been useful outside of the review. And cybersecurity has been a big portion of our time this month. In terms of projects, Capus Fidus resources, as always, continues to be an issue. However, we have indicated last report that we had made offers for 2 additional contractors for programmer and analyst. They have both now started. One just started this past week, and they're both getting up to speed. So it will be some time before they're fully going, but all indications are they're good choices. We still remain trying to fill one of our state BOE programmer positions. That one's a little more difficult because we're dealing with civil service and some of the qualifications there. But we're plugging away. Hopefully we'll have some better progress to report next month. Also, our focus, we've been trying to organize, and I think as Tom had mentioned, outreach both stakeholders for both in terms of treasurers and county boards. We have sessions scheduled this month, Tuesday for the treasurers and the end of the month for the county boards, to engage these groups The treasurers will be giving a demo similar to we've provided you before for the filing system in that interface and soliciting their feedback. For the counties, it'd be more of a working session to gather requirements in terms of their processes, what we can gain from them in terms of data exchange, what we can provide to them, and really to have a good working session and to develop further requirements for the campus side of the application. For Nysboe, we made significant progress this month in terms of the infrastructure. We got out of the planning session stages, and we've actually started implementation of replacing a lot of our network and server equipment, or in upgrading where it's really needed. We've focused initially on the disaster recovery site and here at 40 North Pearl due to operational requirements for the primary and some of the filing periods. However, we're starting next week on our actual main data center in Albany. This work's expected to continue through the end of calendar year, but it's going well. We've made some very good progress just since the last report.
Bill, are you fully staffed up?
Compared to
I mean,
what's needed?
Do you have all of your employees filled, or your slots filled, or are you still?
Of the slots I have one opening for the programmer for Kappa's Fighters we're trying to fill. I think we've identified through the process for particularly the cybersecurity review, that there's a big need. We've identified a lot of things that need to be done, and quite frankly, the resources aren't there to do them all. There's a definite need for additional resources there that we don't have slots for. Not only internally to do things that we need to bolster the security position for the state board, but also I think our role in terms of interaction with the counties on cybersecurity issues and partnering with them has certainly increased of late.
As it should. Is this something we're talking to the governor's office about, asking for more capabilities in his office, considering the cybersecurity concerns that are out there that I think need to be addressed and that we should be the lead on? If we don't have the resources to be doing even our own stuff, how can we possibly have resources to be assisting those counties in doing what they should be doing? Are we looking at possibly adding
Yeah, we
cybersecurity
actually,
type people
we actually
here?
started raising that last year, part of last year's budget.
I don't mean in the budget. I mean in the cybersecurity discussion you're having with the governor's
yeah.
office, apparently.
Oh, yeah. No,
And what's the reception? I mean, is there any, is there a favorable reception? Is it a possibility? What do you think?
There's a number of people we meet with. The division budget's not one of them. But certainly, we have the assistant deputy secretary and the deputy secretary to the governor with regard to the category of security. I don't remember the exact title. Our deputy secretary, which is civil rights, we've raised it repeatedly in our conversations. They're either in the meetings or represented at all the meetings that we've had with the task force and any of the workshops that they've been doing. And it kind of goes around to what we've done a number of things to help explain that the risk is really at the county level, and in order for us to all succeed, knowing it's in a more secure posture, that the risks have been mitigated, I think we need to do that. Or somebody at the state level needs to do that, and there need to be resources, and most of that conversation seems to be we need to do it.
But I think they've
and
been
whether or not we get
receptive to the concept. Whether that ultimately ends up in the budget or not, I don't know.
Well, then
but
that's what's called receptive to the concept, by the way. If there's additional resources given.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, I know internally we've
So-
talked as the risk level at our meetings with, certainly with the panel, the governor's panel, then we were invited to meet with them in New York City. We raised all those issues. We have had discussions since they've met as their report is being finalized to the people writing the report, which is Peter Bloniarz, the executive director. He's been great to work with as far as what are they recommending, but realizing we need the resources here to do more at the state level before we do the outreach to the counties. And then I just think it's our responsibility to put those forward in our budget this year.
But we seem to do that on a regular basis.
I think in our budget as opposed to in a side letter.
Oh, I see.
Now, we think we might change our tactics.
Well, I don't know if tactic is going to help. I mean, I think either they're going to fund it or they're not, but it seems
Well,
to me in this atmosphere, there's a
yeah.
very strong argument.
Well, you know, they have
that more
identified what
resources
do
to
you
this makes
need. So I
sense.
think if we give them a specific list of what we need in the budget, I think might be better than just a side letter, but certainly. we'll
Fine, I
have
don't
those
care what form it
discussions.
takes. I'm just trying
Yeah.
to understand if we're seeing, you know, any new urgency on their behalf, considering all the attention that's being paid to this, not just in New York, but nationally, to make sure the election systems are secure.
Oh, I think they got the sense of urgency, first of all, by doing, the governor has a cybersecurity advisory board, which we have met with directly, not just the executive director. They did assemble what was an exercise that was, quite honestly, unprecedented in scope as far as examining the issues with regards to the election, that involved not just Homeland Security, but the FBI, state police, National Guard, the Army's cybersecurity unit, the Air Force's cybersecurity unit. So I think we got their attention, and as Bob says, you know, working with, you know, representatives of, I'll call them, they've been receptive to the. But that, again, since it's touching security, how much that gets released publicly, it's going to have to be limited, obviously. But you know, part of it's a wait and see. I mean, I think we got their attention because I felt that they recognize that it's not just us. You got to deal with the counties. You have to put resources in. You know, we can't just say, "Hey, do this," because the counties, you know, over half of the counties are small counties. They just don't physically have the people to do it. So I'm hopeful, but you know, we'll see what shows up.
Bill, your staff, do they have to take exams for those positions?
For the civil service positions, they do. There's
All of your staff?
there's an entry. The state has changed their entry requirements in recent years. It used to be a very, what you would consider a pretty standard exam, question answer, multiple choice. Of recent years, it's more of an evaluation of experience, and they're scored on that, and that's an exam score, but there is still an exam of per se.
But it's not a written exam.
Correct. Currently, for entry level, the issue with civil service is you can't come in at every level. You can come in at this level, and then you can.
No, I
there's
know
exams to promote
in some
from there.
counties, they have eliminated the need for the pencil and paper exam.
Right.
To identify experience, which gives you more flexibility in terms of who you hire.
It certainly opens the pool up, but identifying, you still have the rule of three. So you still have to, of that pool, you have to identify the
Because
skill
you're
set you need.
Putting numbers on the experience.
Yes, yes.
Well, that's a pain.
So it does, it expands probably the eligible pool, but you still need to narrow it down to the skill that you need because it's still very generic. And that's just entry
Given the
level.
ability, if you had the ability to restructure your entire department, given the resources that you have now, and then adding, is that something you would want to do?
Oh, absolutely. I think we're certainly, we're utilizing contractors much more than we should for what we're doing. We're paying double, in some cases double, for them than we would for positions, because it's easier to obtain a commodity than it is a position, and that's unfortunate. I think, particularly since they're temporary. They do their work. We still have to maintain systems and work they're doing here after they
Do you
leave.
find that your contractors, when you give them a contract, have to go out and hire people to do the contract?
Well, the state contracting process does that for us. We pick from
I understand.
contracts.
I
Yeah.
understand. So now, your opinion, do you think it would be better than going in for a security person to go in with a restructure?
No, I think I don't know if a restructure is necessarily the case.
Well,
I
I'm
think
saying
an
you
assessment
got-
of the need
you got
is.
restructuring the department just the way we talked about. You're spending X number of dollars now to do X number of work, and you're doing it this way. Now, if I did it with the same amount of money and I did it this way, I could do my job, and it would cost the same amount, or it would cost less, and I'd get a lot more done.
I think.
I don't know if
could-
restructuring is definitely the answer, but.
We have about 12 permanent positions in that department, and I don't know if restructuring that, what you're suggesting, we still have that work to do. And and even that work would be benefit by having more employees in order to keep our website fully functioning, et cetera. The normal to-do list to keep the lights on in the building and to do normal updates to them. But for any of these other projects, when we have asked for money for help or positions for help, the state response has been what's called HBITS, which is hourly based information technology. So it's a contract that allows us to hire temporary work. We used to have called project positions, and they would allow us to go out and create a project position and pay somebody for 18 months and maybe renew it for another 18 months. But under the HBITS program, to get an IT level worker, it's almost double if I could just hire the IT
I
worker.
understand.
But they don't let us hire the IT worker at say $80,000. I'm paying close to $150,000 to get the temporary worker, and then they're gone. So it would be better if we could.
The Board
do
of
that.
Elections has the ability, I don't want to do this publicly, but has the ability to hire its own people.
Well, that's a.
Isn't that the law?
Well, it's within the parameters that get.
Not at the state board level, no. It's not the same rule at
No.
the state as it is at the county.
The counties
different
don't
rules.
have civil service.
Right, we do.
Right.
We do.
No, I'm talking about the state board has the right to say, we want, within the scope of the budget, we want this person, we want that, we want so on and so on. We have a power that other agencies don't have.
No. Not quite, no, I don't believe that's.
It's not
quite true.
as, it's still within the, I mean, any vacancy that comes up, it's still within the parameter of approval within the budget for positions. So, our argument has been if we could take the money that was given to the state board for the technology projects and hire IT people, it would have been cheaper to do that.
And my point is
But that was not a part of the approval.
You have a pot of money that you spend consistently on those, whatever you call them,
Hourly based.
hourly based people and so on, that you can show on an annualized basis, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you can say to somebody, hey, look, we're spending this money anyhow, it's not saving you any money, it's costing us money, okay? I have always found that it is much better than saying, I want more people,
Mm-hmm.
to say, this is how we get them. Because you're already spending the money, and it's not gonna cost you anything for
Well,
us to do that.
But the temporary project and the hourly people are easier for them to just not put the money there in the future, and therefore it goes away, as opposed to
I didn't
employees.
say I didn't know what the political aspect
Right. Well,
I'm just saying that the amount of money here that we're spending isn't getting us value,
correct.
according to the.
Other than the people we have are good
As
people.
we have.
Yes.
So what we're saying is, we want value. We don't want you to be spending more taxpayer money on what we're doing.
So I can assure you that I have communicated, maybe not in that exact set of words, to anybody who will listen to me, that same set of, that concept.
I think you should just
And
put it
I have not
together
succeeded
and
yet.
hand it in. Don't talk to anybody.
Well,
Okay.
Todd and I will do that.
We have certainly communicated that concept, Bob, in a very direct way, I can assure you of that.
You're playing within the game. You're gonna be gamed, that's all. All right, as I said, my.
I have no problem trying to get your way.
So I appreciate your support.
Try these discussions, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're also working on the MOVE project to bring that in-house and replace an currently outsourced application. That's ongoing.
That's the military and voter overseas empowerment for those not familiar with the acronym.
Sorry. Yep. Otherwise, I think we have normal volume for the website. There's a bit of an uptick for voter lookup, which probably be to be expected this time of year, about 20% increase. All I have. Unless question.
What's the timeline for Capus Vitus now?
Timeline is, we have not changed. It's still the April 19th.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Thank you, Bill. We'll move on then to enforcement. Risa Sugarman.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As with last month, I'd like to start with questions that you may have before I start.
Are there questions?
Well, we could start with the same questions I had last week. How many cases have been opened and closed since the last report?
Commissioner, I don't view that that's my role to give you the reports that you consider the reports that the former Enforcement Council gave to you. I told you that I would give you some statistics that I have for 2016, and I
Do you have those, by the way?
Yes.
Because I know we talked about that. Do you have those?
Sure.
Did you bring them with you, or you want to just?
No, I have them.
Okay.
I didn't put them in a report, but I have
okay.
them with me. In terms of the emails that we did, that I reported in the last in last year's annual report, I did not include the months of April because of the primary. The numbers of emails that we got for the presidential primary were, I would say we got over 500 emails in terms of the issues of who was registered to vote, whether people who were registered as blanks were eligible to vote in the Democratic primary or the Republican primary. It threw off numbers that would normally have that we would get normally in the numbers that I had reported in years before. In the 2016 presidential election and the September primary as well. So when I did the numbers that I'm going to present to you, I tried to look at the numbers that would report to you what was the regular type of emails that I had received before, because the numbers about the registration of who was the blank and whether or not they could vote, and it was an outrage that blanks
Well,
couldn't.
I think the three pieces of information that were missing from your annual report that you had provided in previous years was complaints received, complaints opened,
Right.
complaints closed.
Right, but I also indicated the number of emails that I had received on the enforcement email and those that were referred to the board. And the reason that I wanted to explain the numbers is because I didn't include those that were emails that were complaints about anybody who couldn't vote because they were not registered either in the Democratic or Republican Party, because those numbers just skewed the numbers of complaints that came in or issues that came in into enforcement or that were referred to the board. I just wanted to take, because the numbers would have just been different than the prior. They would have increased at an exponential rate. So that's that. Just so you know that. In 2016, we received in the enforcement emails 394 emails, of which 106 were referred to the Board of Elections that I viewed were within their jurisdiction. Files that were open were 80. Of those files, now those are not investigations, but files that were open, we brought 27 of those files into compliance. Of those, 18 of those files would have been hearing officer cases, but they were brought into compliance. so we did not have to file those hearing officer cases. 11 of those cases were closed, and they were closed for a variety of reasons. Either the candidate pled guilty in another jurisdiction, the case was handled by another jurisdiction, either a district attorney's office or a U.S. attorney's office. The violations that were reported were de minimis, or that the matters were settled. And that leaves, those numbers total to 48, and that leaves 32 open cases of the 2016 files open. And I must say, I want to say that for the first 2.5 years, we've been collecting statistics in one manner. I'm looking at those statistics the way that we're collecting them, and to see whether there's an easier way to collect the statistics. So I'm reviewing the manner in which those statistics are collected.
So I just have a follow-up then. So what you just said, if I'm correct, is you received 394 emails that were not in that category you described earlier of just emails about the presidential primary,
Right.
I can't vote, or
Right.
something you didn't feel was appropriate for your unit to handle.
No. I just, that I didn't want to report to you, because in 2015, I reported in my annual report that the division got 294 emails. So if I reported to you that in 2016, I got 1,200 emails.
I got you. Okay.
It's not that we didn't handle them. We reported to or explained to the those who emailed us that if you're not registered in a party, if you're a blank, if you're not enrolled, then you don't vote in a primary for a particular party. The complainant was, the person who emailed was given an answer,
Okay.
but it's not something that was a file that was open.
Okay, so you had 394 emails, and
Right.
you took 106 of those and referred them over to compliance or somebody?
Well,
or
to Bob and Todd, or
Okay,
after
okay.
September 20th, I asked those persons, because Bob wouldn't refer those to his staff, to email Bob and Todd directly.
Okay, so that leaves 285 emails then, that
Okay,
were left with your unit, and you said you opened 80
Correct.
files based on that. So that leaves 205 of those basically unaccounted for.
well,
that
either that
mean-
I answered immediately by saying that, certain of those emails would be about a fire district or a school board election. So those emails, I would respond immediately and say, my division does not have jurisdiction over those kinds of elections.
But
Please.
you don't consider those closed then? You consider those?
No, because we didn't open.
Never open.
Correct.
That's how you're
Correct.
deeming those. All right, so then you had 80 open files,
Correct.
new open files
New
in
open
16, adding to whatever you had remaining from the prior years. And you said you closed, I'm sorry, you mentioned a number you closed?
Well, we
11.
brought 27 of those files into compliance, so
Okay.
those were closed. 11 others were closed for other reasons, either that the violations were de minimis or that,
Okay.
the other reasons that I gave to you.
So you did close some cases.
Correct.
Now, when you close a case, it's my understanding that those should be brought to this board for that purpose.
Well, my reading of the statute says that if they're closed because there's not sufficient evidence, or that, I don't remember the other language of the statute, that there's no violation of the law, that's when I bring them to you. So that when a when a cases referred to another jurisdiction for an investigation because there are violations when someone who is a target pleads guilty in another jurisdiction. When those cases are settled, I don't view that that's part of that statute.
Okay, so when you use the term closed, you mean closed for your unit's purposes, but they may be open
Well,
somewhere
closed,
else in the state, some other entity may
or that
be
there's a
suing.
violation that, in my discretion, I didn't go forward.
That does not constitute a closed case, in your opinion?
Yes, it is closed. But there are violations
It needs to
that,
be brought to this board.
no, because there are violations of the law.
Okay, so when you deem there was a violation of the law, but you deem it, what, de minimis, or you would
Or my
close it?
discretion.
In your discretion, for whatever reason, you deem it not worthy to pursue, and you close it, you don't feel that is a case that needs to be brought to this board for resolution?
Correct.
And
Well, resolution, you don't have any authority to, in my view, when you say resolution, I don't know what that means.
what that means is the statute contemplates that when you close a case, this board is to be informed at that time.
When there is insufficient evidence or no violation of the law.
Those are the two cases you would bring to us, and everything else you would not.
Correct.
So there were none of those.
Well, I didn't say that. The last,
And indeed, the statute presumes, of course erroneously in the case of the incumbent, that the Chief Enforcement Council will proceed to enforce all of those other cases where there is a violation of the law. And that's what to me, the statute is that
The
the Chief Enforcement Council is going to proceed, and where there is no violation of law, the Chief Enforcement Council is going to inform the commissioners. So if the commissioners have a view that it is a violation, they can speak on
We could
it.
have that
That's the
discussion.
legislative history on
The
it.
statute says that hearing officers shall be done at my discretion. So I don't agree with Commissioner Kellner, but I informed the commissioners last meeting that there were cases that I was at the point of, under the statute, at the stage of that section of the law, but because of
I'm sorry, which section?
bringing it to noticing the complaint, bringing it to the complainant and noticing the board under the statute. That's what the statute
closure?
says. Noticing the board,
Of a closure?
Yes.
Okay.
noticing the board,
Okay.
but the documents policy, in my view, under my ethical obligations, I had concerns about whether or not those closures would be confidential, and I still have not resolved those issues.
Of no violation? I mean, if my understanding of that
statute.
section is when you determine there's no credible evidence that a crime has occurred,
That a violation has occurred. It
Okay, so
doesn't-
you're saying
what would be the
you're holding-
confidential item there then?
Well, the ethical responsibilities does not turn on whether there's a violation of the law. The ethical violations of whether an investigation should be public or not does not determine on whether or not a violation has occurred. Investigations are supposed to be kept confidential, even though no violation of the law has been determined.
Okay, fair enough. So you're saying that you've got a certain body of complaints that are being held in abeyance
Yes,
until you resolve
that I can
this
resolve that issue.
of whether you feel you can bring them to this board. So
Correct.
they're currently still open
Correct.
and are awaiting final resolution.
Yes, sir.
I mean,
And is there a number there, or you're not willing to disclose that
I'm
number?
not willing to disclose that.
in our
willing to tell us
previous
that.
one, when it was all under one unit, or one division, when we had met with Bob Freeman as to what was covered under FOIL or what was exempt under FOIL, and at that time, the policy we had in place was still the notice would be to the commissioners that there was no, excuse me, no matter what category, when it was closed and there was no referral or allegation that something went wrong, is the redacting of information on the target, so that there would be, just because that itself would be an issue. So there was a redacting issue as to what part would be made public. Under that tie-in, and that's what we had followed from Bob Freeman ever since then, up until the new arrangement. So, it wasn't our, and then the same decision was yours as commissioners, if you made a referral as to whether or not it was in the public domain or not, and whether it would be confidential in the previous world. But even if we recommended, or if you found to close it without making a referral or finding of any violation, we would then redact out whatever information in the document whenever it was provided as a FOIL. The target, the objector, in order to protect the.
Well, listen, Bob. I'm not conceding that RISA has a legitimate concern here. Let me just say that. I mean, we did adopt a policy several months ago. We knew at the time you didn't agree with it. I think the four of us were very, very comfortable with it. We feel it's the right way to go. I think we still do.
Three of you were comfortable with it. I was uncomfortable with it because it provided for too much confidentiality.
But you wanted to go even further than
Correct.
we went. Okay, fair enough. But so your concerns are not our concerns.
I understand that. And with all
So Bob, just I'm not conceding at all that Risa's articulation of this concern is legit. It's her concern. I don't share it. I don't think any of the four commissioners share it. I think we certainly will act responsibly. We will act with due consideration of all concerned parties and interests, and including the public's interest in determining how to handle the release of any information from her unit. But you've chosen to go your own path, and I can't do anything about that. I can't force you to disclose what I think you should be disclosing to us. I think it's unfortunate that you're doing it, but I can't make you. But I am trying to get a handle on exactly what the body of work here is, because I think that's a legitimate question. And it did come up at the last meeting, and I appreciate you at least sharing those statistics with us, although I agree with Commissioner Kellner, I'd like a more regular type of disclosure than once a year of what your body of work is, because I think that's something we should know, the public should know, and is rightfully in the public domain. Statistics at a minimum. But I guess you don't want to share that either. So I guess, again, we can't make you do anything. So,
I just would like to say that with all due respect to Mr. Freeman, I disagree with his evaluation.
Fair enough. I've disagreed with Mr. Freeman myself several times, so I'm not. But that
it has
said,
been helpful when we ourselves wanted to at least establish a policy, get his views. I agree. Sometimes we've.
Yep.
But certainly, we at least considered his views when we adopted the policy, and then we adopted a policy and followed it, so that we didn't wrong. I mean, I know in the general parameter, I'm not a lawyer, but the concept is one I understand, that you're innocent until proven guilty, except some people you're guilty until proven innocent. So, and proving innocence is hard. So that just the mere allegation that something was wrong against somebody, and when there's a finding that nothing was wrong, and then you get that investigation out, you may have harmed the person. So I understand the reason why there's a concern. It just, what is the, certainly ethics versus statute, those are important issues.
that's fine.
Which one trumps the other. I just wonder if there's a help, if we have any questions, to reach out to Mr. Freeman again to get any views, should that be needed.
I don't think we're quite to that stage. Do you have a report that you want to give?
Could I just ask a clarifying question? with
Well, if
regard
I can
to what-
well, a clarifying question?
Up
Yep.
until,
Sure.
so 394 emails, any phone calls or letters?
Phone calls we don't keep a log of, letters we get, and I don't have that number.
Okay, so,
So there may be more than the 394 that came in.
Letters
Some
generally are subsumed within the files, but I can't say that.
So you have nothing else you want to report to us? I don't know if there's other questions that any of the commissioners have. Anything else? There is one matter I thought we could bring up in executive session, so when we go into executive session, we could just maybe do that. But other than that, I have nothing else. Anybody else have anything? Okay. Then we can move on to old business. And that is resolution to certify vote cast enhancements. This is a report from, I believe, Tom and Brendan.
Yes, this,
You want to give us a
Yeah,
verbal
we-
report as well?
mind?
You go ahead.
Okay. Anna never let me speak. We started this process where we've notified the board. I believe it was last September. We've been working through it with our independent testing lab with Nysboe. We have our own report in here, and basically what this does is it's a change to the vote cast that is voluntary, that the system or the counties don't need to use it, but it enhances the votes cast report and enables wards to report for that. So that's what this is. This is the resolution. There's also the our functional testing document and NYSTEC's review of it as well.
Okay, I move the resolution, but I do have a question. That I want to confirm that we're all agreed that the current regulations satisfy this last sentence on the first page of the NYSTEC report, where they recommend that there be a hash check file validation check by the county prior to installation of this update to the EMS, to confirm that the update is the same as what was tested by SLI and presumably what is escrowed at the State Board of Elections. Are you able to confirm that that is our understanding?
Yes.
Yeah, that's our understanding.
Okay, great.
You're comfortable with the
Now
report?
I'm comfortable with the report and with the
And
resolution.
you've made a motion to adopt, and seconded by Commissioner Span. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and opposed, that is adopted. That was our new business, or old business for today. New business, we have the automated audit tool, and I believe that was already addressed.
Correct.
You
In our
have,
unit report, yes.
you have comments that have come in.
Yep, and we're
that
gonna be
you
working
feel will
with-
materially change the proposed regulation? Were they of that nature, they would have material impact on it?
Yes, we're going to be working with counsel's
I'll have to
office to.
renotice it.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, so we should hold this up till you're able to incorporate any changes you deem appropriate. Would we anticipate seeing this by the next meeting?
Well, we don't know when that is yet, but yes, we anticipate that.
It
With
won't
that
be-
caveat,
It won't be
yes.
tomorrow. Right. That gives you any comfort. Yeah, I mean, I would hope we'd get this, I'd like to get this done, so if we
But
could,
the four of us, I know, our new team in operations, fully assembled, and Todd and I, we all thought that there were helpful
Okay.
things in here that would require to go back out for public comment.
so there are material changes that
Yes.
require
Yes.
a new comment period?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we'll put that off until hopefully the next meeting, under old business at that point. And now we go on to the special federal voters. This is, I believe, that change that the feds were asking us to make as to how we treat voters who are currently residents of New York, but are temporarily located overseas. We'll now be treating them like special federal voters, is that correct?
That is correct. We went over it at the last meeting, I think a little bit the meeting before in terms of the background, but it ensures that someone who meets the criteria as a special federal voter and also meets the criteria under Article 5 to be a regular voter in this state can obtain the ballot by the federal transmission methods and deadlines, and also receive the state portion that they're entitled to. So it causes us to interpret the federal law with the state law so that both effects are accomplished.
So these voters will be getting a federal ballot and later a state ballot.
Yes.
So they would
They currently only get at.
Actually, this
State.
reg.
This would make them treated more like a military voter than a special federal voter.
Yes.
They would get the federal ballot and the state and local ballot,
Yeah.
whereas before they were getting both sets of races, but they
Right.
were not allowed to get the federal portion of it
Early.
Yes, correct,
Right.
or by the additional transmission methods.
Right, right. Okay.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have also adopted that. Our last item is a Fair Campaign Code complaint that came in. It's rather extensive.
I just moved the adoption of the draft, of council's draft.
Okay, so there's a motion to adopt the recommendation of council on this, and there's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That completes the public portion of today's meeting. We have two items left. One is there is an executive session, so I would ask the attorneys to stay. If we could do that. There's also another board
We
meeting.
should talk about the date for the board
Right.
meeting. And I want to formally move to go into executive session on litigation matters,
Okay?
on a personnel matter.
Okay.
And on a campaign finance enforcement matter.
Well, it's really a
with yours.
litigation matter.
All right, that's
a
fine.
litigation.
So litigation and
Yeah.
personnel. I have
Yeah.
one personnel issue I want to discuss.
Okay. So we've litigation, well, let's do the meeting,
Lisa's
let's do
part.
the next meeting first.
Yes.
And then we'll go into executive session. So, let's look at our calendar, and today is the 15th of September. And I'm thinking the last week of October? What do you think? Does anybody care? The
What do
week of
Todd
the
and Bob want to
23rd?
do?
How about the week of the 23rd?
We need your availability perhaps for a web meeting on the 2nd of
I
October.
understand that.
That,
I will not be available, I should just let you know that, but I know the other three commissioners will, and that would be for the limited purpose of ruling on a potential challenge to a judicial race that may come in.
Because that's the day we have to certify the ballot.
Fair enough. I would just ask that you restrict it to that, and that we could hold anything over to the next meeting unless it has to be done, because I can't do it. But is the week of October 23rd something people are interested in?
I think that's the time we do.
That's fine.
Okay.
So that Tuesday or Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday's bad for me. Could we do
So
Tuesday? How about, how's the 24th for everybody?
It's good for me.
Is that bad? It looks bad, your face looks bad. Are you sure?
Is Thursday any good? or
I could
is
do
that-
Thursday as well. I can do the
Thursday, all right? Thursday's
26th.
better for me.
Good or bad?
Oh, I have a trial that day.
He's got a
Well, on the
trial.
26th then. All right.
Did this already?
That's right, I'll change my appointment.
You sure? Commissioner Spano? We're talking the 24th right now.
I'm okay the 24th.
Okay, are you sure?
What about the 23rd? That's not
Greg, if it's a problem.
23rd? How about 23rd?
That's fine.
23rd, I'm okay.
How about 23rd?
23rd 's good.
Monday.
23rd 's good.
23rd, okay. Good
Monday.
suggestion. Let's do the
Thank you.
23rd, the Monday, the 23rd of October.
And if there's a problem?
Yeah, we
change
can adjust, but seems to work for everybody.
Sounds good.
So we'll plan on the 23rd. And that completes today's meeting. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for purposes of litigation and personnel.
So moved.
Motion? Second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. We will not be coming back into public session. I would just ask, I think the attorneys to stay.
Uh,